What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the broader markets. I'm also going to break down why SPY is so far struggling to break some key resistance, which could lead to a possible rejection if some key things pan out. I'll also break down what's happening with the data coming out for tomorrow, as we have the PCE data coming out in the morning, what you should be watching for as time goes on. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below, or use my QR code right here to sign up. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100, you're going to get $20 of free Nvidia stock. If you deposit $2,000 or more, you're going to get $50 worth of Nvidia. Deposits $10,000 to get $300 worth of the stock, or deposits $50,000 to get $1,000 of free Nvidia. You're also going to qualify for a 3.6% APY base rate plus a 4.5% APY extra for 3 months, making it a total of an 8.1% APY. The offer ends very soon, in just about 11 days from now, so please check out my link down below to sign up. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So, looking at SPY, as you guys could tell, there were lots of times when SPY approached that 685 area, and we got consolidation and then a rejection that happened back in the very end of October. Then in mid-November, in the middle of November, we basically retested 685, consolidated, then got this rejection. And now today, we basically saw SPY do the same thing. The last couple of days, we slowly pushed closer to 685, only to just consolidate. And then instead of just breaking out, we're just continuing to consolidate, and we're going to see if we get another rejection from there. If we do get the rejection, right? If we start to see SPY reject like that, we're watching to see if this is going to be like a left shoulder, a head, and then a right shoulder. Now, we can't guarantee the rejection will happen, so you want to be very unbiased. And simultaneously, we're going to see if we continue to consolidate for now and what the catalyst is going to be that brings us down. Could it just be FOMC? We'll have to wait and see. On the QQQ, something very similar is going on, right? We basically have a tendency of rejecting off 625. This happened back in the beginning of November. This was basically very close to like the end of October, actually. And then the same thing happened in mid-November as well. In the middle of November, we saw the QQQ test 625, but instead of breaking it, we got a rejection. So right now, we are basically retesting 625. We're consolidating, and we're going to see if we continue to consolidate like this. But overall, we'll be watching to see if we get some kind of rug pull to form that right shoulder for an inverse head and shoulders. So I'll talk more about SPY and the QQQ and the broader markets in just a couple of minutes. Let's break down what catalyst is coming out for tomorrow and how it could be affecting the markets. So as a reminder, okay, today we got initial jobless claims, and continuing jobless claims. Everything was basically very close to expectations, not too bad whatsoever. However, moving forward, I just want to remind you all that tomorrow we have the very important PCE data coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. This is not up-to-date data, though. This is old data from the month of September. So for the month of September, we have the core PCE, personal spending, and all that data month over month and year over year coming out, which could cause some volatility. Simultaneously, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report and the 5-year inflationary expectations report also coming out, which could cause some volatility as well. So get ready for some volatility around 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, or 30 minutes after the stock market opens. Besides that, there's nothing else that's too significant coming out for tomorrow. But next week, we do have some important JOLTS numbers on Tuesday. And then for Wednesday, we also have FOMC, which is going to be very big for the stock market, in my opinion. I do expect a lot of volatility next week. I think there's a very high probability for that. And then this week has just been very choppy. So looking at our latest CPI data, when CPI came out, all items CPI went up a little bit, and then core CPI was actually very flat. A little bit, it went down a little bit for September, so we're going to watch and see if PCE is similar. But overall, when this data came out, the market still held up back then, so we're going to see what happens as time goes on. Given the fact that the jobs numbers that came out yesterday were showing some weakness in the economy, and then we also saw the same thing going on today, there was just kind of flat jobs numbers. There's now an 87% chance we get a cut by the Fed. The market has almost fully priced this in, which could be indicative of the possibility that the market could continue to push or even consolidate for some time. But then after FOMC comes out, if the Fed announces that they're going to be cutting, that could already be priced in, and we'll see if we get some kind of rug pull or not. Or if the rug pull comes earlier, we'll see about that. The Fed, however, is continuing to be more on the dovish side as we're seeing them continuing to buy back treasuries. That's what's happening thus far. And we're still seeing more of these repurchase agreements and their treasury buybacks in the billions every couple of days, which tells us that the Fed is continuing to remain more dovish, and they are once again easing on policy again. Finally, when it comes to other earnings, keep in mind that Salesforce, they had decent earnings. The share price did well. And then a lot of the dollar stores, like Dollar General, for example, and Dollar Tree, they had good earnings as they raised their guidance. So good job by Dollar General. The share price is doing well. And besides that, there's nothing else too significant for earnings for the rest of the week. Now, fear makes up the majority of sentiment. We're getting very close to neutral right now, which tells us that the fear and greed index is currently catching up. Momentum is at neutral as the market was just trading sideways. The put to call option ratio is dumping as we're seeing more puts being closed because of all the chop that's going on. And the VIX is dipping, but it's still more neutral. It has not crashed or bounced. It's still stuck in the middle. So, what is my prediction heading into tomorrow? Well, honestly, guys, the market is indecisive. Okay. So, as we dip towards 682, we're bouncing. And as we touch 685, we like to reject. So, we're just kind of doing this back and forth thing for now. But I do want to warn you all that there is a risk that the upside is very limited. Even if they try to push us a little bit higher, it's still limited. And I think that even if we do try to touch these higher levels, we're going to likely continue to consolidate, and there is a risk of some kind of rejection because of this bearish divergence. Right? We could be looking for a big rejection on SPY and the QQQ, especially because of this inverse head and shoulders like pattern that's beginning to develop. And it would be a very big blessing if we do get that pullback back into like the 660s. If that happens, I'll be looking for a buying opportunity for the end of the year because I believe SPY will reach $700. I really believe that, but I think that if we get the pullback first, that would be very healthy. Now, there's a bearish divergence on SPY when you look at the MACD and then look at the RSI. The same thing is going on. We have a big bearish divergence developing. That's oftentimes a sign that we're about to form a top soon. And on the daily time frame, as we're trying to push, there's this unfilled gap at 675, and there's also another gap down here around like 660. But I think the main gap is 675. There's a good chance we do return there very soon. But as of right now, it does not look like we're ready because we don't really have confirmation. Look at the last 5 days on SPY. It's just been back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Price action, that's all we're essentially doing. And we do have a tendency of kind of like either gapping down then bouncing or kind of like pushing then dropping as the days go on. I think that heading into tomorrow, there's a good chance that SPY consolidates like this and we just see a lot of sideways price action, especially since it's going to be Friday. But then heading into next week, I would not be surprised if we do get some kind of rejection move. I do still favor that because we're so far struggling to hold above 685. And also because of the fact that, there is that bearish divergence that makes me a little bit more apprehensive. This would also be a very, very good area because let me just show you this real quick. When you look at our fib retracement, now let's just say we do go to like 685, or even if we go a little bit higher, they do try to push us a little bit. um, it would be very healthy to retest the golden pocket, which would take us close to like 665 or the 660s in the upcoming weeks. And there's a good chance of that happening looking at this setup. So I think that what's going to happen is this. There's going to be consolidation because we have not broken support or broken resistance. We're in the middle. But as time goes on, there's still the downside risk, just like what happened over here and over here when SPY has tested 685 every time we've gotten a rejection. So if you're bullish, you want to see us close above 685, basically not 685, but 686 specifically. The 686 is because 685 could be tested. We've tested this many times before we got a rejection, and we could even revisit 685, but I'm saying to close above the 685, so I mean we have to be in the 686s, and then we need to close above that and continue to hold there for us to remain bullish. That is going to be like the more bullish case, right? If we end up holding the key support. If we're bearish, if you want to be a big bear, you want to see us essentially lose this 20 EMA. So see this green line that's acting as a support. That's going to be very close to 682. If we close below that, there's a risk of us returning to 678. My prediction is that I think there's two likely possibilities. Either we struggle to break 685 and we kind of like consolidate, then dump, and we start dumping as soon as tomorrow, if not by early next week. Or what could happen is that we consolidate a little bit more. We could even try to go a tiny bit higher to retest like 686, but we don't close above it. and then maybe they continue to chop us around for a day or two, and then when FOMC comes, that's when we get the rug pull. That's another possibility. They may not give us some kind of rug pull until FOMC. But as of right now, I do favor those possibilities. Consolidation to continue, then a pullback. I think that's the most likely possibility. I'm not guaranteeing, and I'm saying this is what I think is going to likely happen looking at the current setup with the inverse head and shoulders, the bearish divergence, and the chop that we're getting. SPY is not doing the best of jobs at breaking 6.8. The 685 is just getting out of there. We also have not lost 682, so I'm not really super bullish or bearish yet until we break a direction. So I believe we consolidate a bit longer. I think we might kind of pop a bit, come back down and consolidate in this range. Whether we get the big rug pull as soon as like next week or if it happens after FOMC, I still favor some kind of like rug pull that's going to be coming. I do think that's very likely. And I think that the inverse head and shoulders scenario makes the most sense for SPY because of these divergences and our technical indicators. It's also because tech stocks are starting to show some weakness. Notice that the QQQ tested this resistance, so we did not just squeeze past 625. Instead, we're just kind of struggling to break this. Back in early November, we touched 625 and then rejected. In mid-November, we touched 625 and then we rejected. And then today we touched 625 and we struggled to break out of it again. Now, if we break and hold the 625s, if you're bullish, you want to see us basically do that. And if we close above 625 and we're completely above that, we could be attempting to fill the gap at 629. There's still some upside potential if that breaks. If we're bearish, you want to see us lose 619. If we lose 619, we could be looking for a dip to 613. And if that fails, let's look for some downside. I believe that we're in a consolidation phase and that one thing I see very evidently is that there are gaps left on SPY and the QQQ, and it would not be surprising if we come down to fill some of these gaps. For example, there's a gap over here around 609 that's unfilled. I think there's another one around 618, and I think we're due to fill some gaps below in case we do get a rejection. So my prediction is this. There's a possible left shoulder, head, and we're going to see if this right shoulder forms. I think we consolidate between 620 and 625. We could even go to like 626, come back down. It depends on where we close. If we don't close above that, we're going to continue to consolidate. And then I think that either as soon as next week or maybe by FOMC day, we might be getting that rug pull. I think that's what we're going to get because we have a triple bearish, not a triple, but a double bearish divergence. And there is that risk of the inverse head and shoulders, and there are gaps to fill, which makes me suspect that we are going to slowly get some kind of pullback move for the final dip of the year before we see a monstrous squeeze to finish off December heading into January. That is my prediction, guys. That's what I think will likely end up happening. For the IWM, we're doing well. We pushed very nicely, but notice that historically, the Russell tests 252, then it rejected. It tests 252, then it rejected. Now we're testing 252. Are we about to reject off this resistance? That's what happens historically. So you want to be very, very careful with this current setup. I'm going to draw out a horizontal line right here. So what I see is that there is a rejection forming right here. We need to basically break the 252s to continue to push. If we don't, we could be looking for 247 or below to turn back down. So be very careful as we hit resistance. On ES, I still think we're bullish, which makes me think this might go a little bit higher, just a bit higher, which could help SPY and the QQQ kind of like consolidate or go a tiny bit higher. But I'm looking for this left shoulder, head, and then for the right shoulder, it depends. We might climb a tiny bit higher for like 6,900. If we break 6,900, we're bullish. But if we don't, we're going to be looking for a potential rejection. If we get back below 6,850, we could be looking for that right shoulder. And then we could be looking for a big bounce after that. So a move like this on ES could be coming maybe after FOMC or such. So for tomorrow specifically, I think that we consolidate and push closer to 6,880 to 6,900, but then we could reject again and just consolidate. So I just see some sideways price action, not really much for now. NQ is near its top, I think, because there is a divergence. There's a bearish divergence here, and then simultaneously, look at this. There's a left shoulder, head, and we're going to see if we go a little bit higher to push towards like 25,800, and then we're going to see if we form that right shoulder before we try to bounce. So give this the time it needs. On Bitcoin, we have a nice higher low that's being made. We're going to see if we break 95,000 or if we lose 90,000. We could be tipping to 90,000, and we'll see how it goes. On Tesla, we're looking a little bit more bullish, though. I think Tesla's outperforming the market as we're getting lots of good news, lots of buy ratings. I want to see if Tesla could hold above 450. As long as that holds, we should continue this uptrend for 460. This will likely outperform the market, and Tesla's looking quite bullish. Nvda, it's in the middle for now. We have a nice looking accumulation. However, this may continue to consolidate between 185 and 180 for some time before it tries to break out higher. So I see some consolidation. Apple's looking bearish. We're making lower highs here. It may consolidate and dip back down to 277. We'll see if it bounces. So that's what I think, is the most likely possibility. For Netflix, we pumped and dumped. We might retest 104 before it continues to fall, but it's on the downtrend. We could be looking for 102 very soon. MSTR is consolidating, but it might be retesting 182 to retest its 20 EMA. There's some weakness on the chart. On Celsius, we look more bullish with an inverse head and shoulders, but there is tough resistance around 43. I could see us retest 43. We need to break this. If we don't, we could turn back down. Supermicro also has a nice looking inverse head and shoulders accumulation. If we break past 34.5, we're looking for an attempt for 35.6. So I could see this reaccumulate and push for the 35s. Palantir is looking more bullish with a nice inverse head and shoulders, but we might come down towards like 174 first before it tries to bounce. There might be a small downside move here because today we completely struggled to break past 178. Rivian looks more bullish, but there is some tough resistance right here around 18.1. If we break that, we could continue to squeeze up towards like 18.5 or above. But 18 flat is going to be kind of tough for Rivian, so we're going to see if that holds. If it doesn't, we could retest 17.19. SoFi also has an inverse head and shoulders like pattern. We're going to see if 27.8 holds. If not, we're looking for 26.5. AMD, it's in the middle. It's consolidating, but there is some weakness in the possibility of a left shoulder, head and right shoulder. Unless we get back above 220, I do anticipate some consolidation, and there is a risk of it dipping towards like 213, 210. ARM looks more bullish. We're favoring an attempt to get back up to 142, and then eventually this resistance around 143.2 for some temporary upside. So I see upside potential. PayPal has resistance around 62. We'll see if that breaks. If not, we could be dipping back down towards 60. Coinbase, it's once again kind of like rejecting. We're going to see if we can hold 270. It might be dipping to 270. We'll see if we bounce. If not, we dip even more. Looking at Amazon, we're making lower highs here. We have a head and shoulders like pattern, but we could bounce towards like 230, and we'll see if we turn back down. So look for some temporary upside, and we'll see how it goes. Meta basically has this wick forming here. We're going to see if we hold 666. If we don't, we're going to be at risk of dipping to 650. On Google, we're making lower highs. However, it's been consolidating right here and basing at the 20 EMA, which means it might bounce tomorrow for like 322 again. But overall, it's just consolidating, not really doing much. Microsoft may retest 483, and then we'll see if he rejects. So it might bounce a bit before it turns back down. And Oracle may try to bounce back up towards that 218 area, and we'll see how it goes. But I see some upside potential. Looking at Broadcom, this is showing some weakness. It kind of popped a bit only to turn back down. I see a retest of 375 tomorrow. The VIX is on a downtrend. We're approaching the 15 area. This is typically where the VIX likes to bounce, and there is a bullish falling wedge, which could be indicative of some upside. I don't know, though, if the upside happens tomorrow or if it takes like a couple of days. Keep in mind, we only have a couple of trading days until FOMC, right? We basically have Friday tomorrow, Monday and Tuesday, then FOMC comes. So it's either going to likely bounce most likely tomorrow or by FOMC day, I think. So we'll see how it goes. The 10-year is consolidating. The dollar is also trying to bounce, approaching 99.1, and we'll see if this continues to push. And besides that, crude is kind of flat. So I do think the market could go a little higher tomorrow and consolidate. I don't think we're just going to break out and squeeze. I think we're going to see a lot of consolidation on SPY and the QQQ. We could even try to go a little higher. But like I said before, as the consolidation continues, there is a risk of rejection, especially if the market fails to hold at 625 for the QQQ and for 685 for SPY. I think we could consolidate longer, but my concern is that there is that risk of some kind of like rug pull that could be coming either tomorrow. But if it doesn't happen by tomorrow, it may happen sometime next week, maybe after FOMC. And I lean in that direction, looking at the bearish divergences and the current setups. That's what the setups favor, but I will change my mind if we get a big breakout. If we break some key resistances, then of course I could change my mind. But that is where I lean right now, that there might be some kind of pullback coming. Maybe like next week. It depends on how we end up closing tomorrow. So we'll see how it goes. We do have PCE data, so hopefully that goes well, but this is delayed data the market's going to be reacting to alongside the Michigan Consumer Sentiment data at 10 a.m., so be ready for that. Until then, I anticipate consolidation, then a risk of some downside later on, either tomorrow, if not by early next week. And we'll see how it goes. So that's what I think is going to likely happen for now. But of course, my opinions could change if we start breaking some key levels. But get ready for some consolidation tomorrow. With that being said, I thank you all for listening. Have an awesome rest of your guys' days, nights, or evenings. And I'll be back very soon with another update tomorrow morning before market open. Until then, I wish you all the best and peace out.